So for the last talk of OSU Talk event, again, all about overcoming obstacles, and Chiv will be discussing the various, natures of the OSU tournament scene and community, and some maybe problematic things that should definitely be addressed. So Chiv, I will leave you to your talk, and thank you everyone for being here.
Sounds good. So hey everyone. So my name is Chiv or Kevin, and just for a bit of backstory, so I've been playing tournaments for about 2.5 years now, probably three. First year was around pretty much only regional tournaments, but then I extended my knowledge to like international, and then later on over the last year, I've also been staffing. Um, for I guess any credibility of some sort, I do have two badges, but also I have been map pooling for a lot of big tournaments, including things like Corsace. I map pooled and test played for the Perennial. Um, United States Cup 2021 and some other big names. But yeah, just to keep it too short, so today we're going to be going over what I think is the overall current state of OSU tournaments and how it's, evolved over the last couple years. What I've seen personally and what I think is some things that we need to touch on because I think some of the parts of the current tournament scene are a bit unhealthy. All right, so let's begin. So first things first is that I wanted to talk about I guess new players and how people get into tournaments. So um, back then, or generally most of the time, the only way you really could have gotten into tournaments is pretty much signing up and then praying that some random extrovert captain would pick you up in LFT. This happened with me as well. My first international tournament was Hippo Cup 3. And I like to say that this actually got improved a lot because the tournament resources have actually improved dramatically over the last couple of months or years even. Some notable things include more advertisement on the OSU client, the introduction of MadeBot or OSU matchmaking, and also just in general, I think the overall tournament scene has grown way bigger into that pretty much every player is going to probably try playing tournaments at some period in their life. Um, this is one thing that I was going to talk about pretty shortly because I thought it was something that I was really happy with actually. I felt that the community is more and more accepting of tournaments. Tournaments are becoming more and more popular, and also the gap or the wall between tournament players and solo players is diminishing pretty rapidly. And yeah, everyone is really getting into it, which is a good thing. That being said, though, that does lead to a lot of different problems recently that I have, I guess, noticed and what I wanted to talk about. So, first things first, the most important thing that I think we need to talk about currently for new players is that the problematic state, which revolves around basically D-rankers or I guess badge system and whatnot. So, if you guys have already tried playing tournaments before, chances are you probably entered in a rank range restricted tournament somewhere around 1K to 5K, maybe lower 5 digit. But what happened was that you probably seated pretty low, and unfortunately, maybe your first match was okay, but couldn't really make it that far because the level of the players around you were way too high. And that's something that's a bit of a problem is that new players that when they try to get into tournaments, they're kind of being, I guess, dismissed by pretty much everyone else being significantly stronger than them, not only due to experience, but also being supposedly much lower ranked than they actually should be. And the only thing that's really been combating this, I guess, has been the badge rated system or BWS, which pretty much means that every badge adds an artificial number of ranks to you. And once you gain, the more and more badges you get, it's at like an exponential rate. So that is what we currently have in system, right? Is that there's a BWS system, but it doesn't really work out that well. Eventually, some players are able to finally, get pushed out of the rank range because they accumulate too many badges. Obvious players being some people like X Kirito, who's finally getting out of that 4 digit range despite being here for almost a year now. But also a lot of 5 digit players. And I think that the BW system is a bit flawed because not only does it mean that players are going to be, I guess, forced to play higher ranks because although, people have, I guess, like, how do I say this? Sorry. It's bad both ways because not only does it mean that it's going to take time to remove D-rankers and people are going to be slowly withdrawn from the system. Not very fast and doesn't really apply that fast. People can still sign up regardless of pending badges. But at the same time, players that do end up obtaining badges find themselves playing less and less tournaments because, to be frank, there's almost no tournaments in the 3 digit range at this point. Pretty much, there's only open rank, and the majority of all interesting and fun tournaments are pretty much all located in 4 digit and below. And this is a two-way street. It means that players will have to continuously face against D-rankers over and over again until they become a D-ranker themselves or they quit tournaments. Or secondly, the D-ranker makes it out and pretty much can't play with his friends anymore because he has too many badges and all the tournaments are pretty much locked out. This also goes in a further different path of problems, which there's like no three-digit tournaments whatsoever. But the main thing is that I think that as a system, we need to probably look at BWS and see what it currently accomplishes and also what we can do to make it better. Now, there has been in talks with some tournament leads, such as Dio, where they're talking about introducing a tournament MMR system, which means that basically by either win or loss, you would gain an artificial amount of elo, just like any system like League or Apex. I'm pretty sure are familiar with it. But this has been something that's been in talks for a very long time and unfortunately hasn't really made any push recently. Due to the fact that it is just incredibly difficult to judge skill over just like playing a couple maps. Some people could be having bad days and they have to lose elo. It does exist in OC matchmaking, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to bring up is that I think that BWS as a system right now definitely could use a lot of improvement. And I think that overall speaking, we could be looking at a tournament MMR system if there was more and more desire for it, and if there's more and more people helping out people like Dio, who are basically the ringleaders of the current OC tournament scene. Yeah, so furthermore to that, that leads into the next thing I wanted to discuss, which was the lack of tournaments at 3-digit range and above. So, pretty much speaking, if you are anywhere around the rank of 100 or 500, there might be like 2 or 3 tournaments maximum you can play at once. And this is very minimal in comparison to the vast majority of 4-digit and 5-digit tournaments on there. If you were to go to the community tab right now and look at tournaments, chances are there are pretty much no tournaments that there are pretty much no 3-digit tournaments in comparison to how many tournaments there are for the rest of the rank range. And this is due to the fact that a lot of these they just know, I guess, like overall interest in high hosting larger tournaments for bigger players, or larger tournaments for higher tier players because you gain less out of being a host. There's less players, so there's going to be less people playing. Generally speaking, higher tier players are more critical of flaws in map pools and reffing. And overall, there's just not much to gain from hosting higher ranked tournaments. And especially with, to be honest, some tournament hosts finally stopping hosting. I know T1G didn't decide to host USC or 4WC this year, and it doesn't seem like 3G is being hosted as well this year, which is 3 big tournaments that most 3-digits are looking forward to. And that's really caused, I guess, a dent in their progress in tournaments. And I think that with that being said, it's something we want to discuss that is there any possibility that higher ranked players and higher ranked tournament players can further get more tournaments, and is there any interest for hosts to continue hosting higher level tournament play? Currently, actually, there's a lot of open rank gameplay, which is something that a lot of 3-digits are looking to prove themselves in. But as I said, a lot of 3-digits who don't have the tournament experience are going to pretty much join an open rank tournament and get completely demolished by pretty much everyone around them. And it leads back to the same problem that, there's a significant gap in skill, a significant gap in experience between tournament players and regular players. This leads also back to the concept of creating a tournament MMR system where the 3-digit player could probably start at something pretty low, but if you were to win a lot of matches at the start, he could gain a lot of MMR or ELO and immediately rise up. And same goes for people who are overranked and suddenly you don't have to fall back down. So we create a system where people are properly balanced at their skill. And overall, I think it's something that we could definitely look more towards. Now, that's a lot of talking about players. And I wanted to talk also a lot about staffing, which is probably a little more boring. But something important to note is that I guess there's a lot of not really issues, but I guess more of a disconnect between players and staff recently. And this is across multiple roles. And the first one I wanted to talk about, I guess, is reffing. And if you guys have already heard before, there are some, we call them demon refs, or very strict refs in the tournament scene who are extremely motivated not only to ref, but also very tight on timers. And this has created a huge disconnect between players and referees alike, due to the fact that refs believe that matches should be professionalized and be at a very consistent state, while players don't really expect those timers that they are set to be like that harsh. So yeah, we wanted to talk about how, I guess, the disconnect between players and referees alike is something that I think is going to become more and more of a bit of a problem as OC tournaments become more and more professional. And it's something that I also want to mention is because that are we making tournaments for the enjoyment of players, or are we making tournaments to push OSU as a game, right? That's the biggest problem, is that we're currently in this transition phase where OSU is getting way bigger and improving, I guess, in popularity at a much larger rate. And that creates more and more tournaments, that creates more and more tournament players. But that original charm of, every tournament having 2 warm-ups, people just picking whatever they want to pick for fun, people doing strat roulette, whatever, that's kind of all been pushed underground. Pretty much every tournament doesn't have any warm-ups anymore. Strict refs, pretty much copy-pasted pools over and over again. And it's kind of that fact where it's like all OSU tournaments are becoming more and more standardized. And I don't know if that's the position or that's the direction that we want to push ourselves in, or if it's just, the modernization of the tournament scene. As I said before, map pool is also being standardized, which is something I wanted to talk about, which is map pool and player disconnect, which is also going to be referencing pretty much how map poolers want to make a pool that's most fun for players, but also map poolers want to be pulling stuff that they find enjoyable. And that's a big problem, because then the players want to be, there's a bit of a disconnect where players will complain about maps being not fun, maps being low quality, maps being overused, maps being too boring. And factoring in all of this, map pooling has become probably one of the hardest roles, if not the hardest role, besides hosting, obviously, in terms of tournament play. And as a map pooler myself, it's become really difficult to satisfy players. And I think that it's something I wanted to talk about, because I think we need to understand what players want as map poolers, because there's some map poolers that pretty much don't even look at the map pool feedback channel and just pool as much as they want. And on the flip side, players that don't actually understand how difficult map pooling as a process is. And this creates many rifts in the relationship, because I think overall this is probably the most underappreciated role in tournament staffing in general. I know Dio has talked about this a lot, but it's something that's important to know, is that players should be more open-minded towards how the map pooling process works, and staff should be more transparent with how the staffing process works for players. And I think that's something that I really want to strive to, I guess, focus on as kind of map pooler myself, that we should push towards, back to the way where it's like everyone enjoyed playing pools. Pools are meant to be for fun for players, and players are supposed to understand that map pooling is a fun but also a very difficult process. And I think if that bond is strengthened, then the pool quality will actually generally increase over time, and overall the understanding between player and map pooler relationship will be very strong. And yeah, besides map pooling and refing, which are probably the 2 most important roles, there's one smaller role that I wanted to talk about, which is commentating. And this is largely a bit of a concern to me, because it's actually has regards to higher level tournament play, and also commentators wanting to become, or how to basically be a commentator. So it doesn't take much to commentate for a lower tournament, but especially for higher tournaments, a lot of tournaments are looking for a specific credibility, and it's very difficult to obtain a commentator spot at the highest level of tournament play, including things like OWC and Corsace. And what's a bit upsetting to me is that I feel like those higher tournaments don't really look at the achievements that somebody has done, and rather they look at I guess like preference or favoritism or nepotism to some extent. And this has been pretty adamant if you looked at OWC 2021 and 2020, where I think both Fire Rage and Dio did not get commentating spots despite being extremely active in the tournament scene. And this could lead to multiple different paths of arguments, right? Is it because Dio and Fire Rage don't have a good voice to commentate? Is it because they're too unprofessional? Is it because they need more experience? Is it because there are better commentators out there? And these are all questions we ask when it's like, what actually does it take to be a commentator, and what is the overall goal for a commentator, right? So that's something I wanted to know, is that I feel like the overall transparency of staff isn't really that large. We still don't really know why Dio or Fire didn't really get any commentating spots. Dio ended up getting his last year, I believe, though, so congrats to him. But it's really unfortunate to see that there's still this disconnect in staffing, where it's like players don't really know what's happening, and staff is kind of refusing to tell or share any information. And I think that this disconnect between players and staff is something that we really need to focus on, not only between commentating and between staff, but also between the players and map poolers and players and referees, in order to create, a much stronger tournament scene. And I think that's something that we should all strive towards. So yeah, besides, I've touched on a lot of topics today, pretty rushed, but hope you guys understand it's pretty informal. So we talked about badge rated system and how to balance tournaments properly, including I guess the BWS system and MMR. We talked about the disconnect, well not disconnect, the lack of tournaments at high tournament play for 3 digits and not including open rank really. And also we also talked about map pooling disconnects, referee disconnects, and overall how to strengthen the tournament scene as a whole. So yeah, besides that, I guess what I could also talk about is I guess communication is the last thing that I wanted to mention, and that's pretty much ties everything we've talked about today. And that I feel like um, there's a lot of, I guess, unprofessionalism or the way people deal and solve problems in the community is very immature at times. And I think a lot of people probably have recognized this. If you spend any time on Twitter, if you spend any time on any popular Discord, chances are somebody is complaining about something that should be private matter to sort out, but they're drawing attention towards it. And it creates a much bigger problem than it actually should. And with this communication issue, players are pretty much unwilling to listen to other players, and people create echo chambers for themselves. People ran on Twitter all the time. I know this happened literally last week. One top player mentioned that there was a really bad map in the perennial pool, and that got a lot of traction, probably like 300 likes on the tweet, and everyone just kind of like dogpiled completely on the map without any remorse for any of the map poolers, without any remorse for any of the mappers themselves, because they made a custom of the map as well, right? It's not like people are not putting effort in. And I understand that players can be frustrated. Players can be upset about how a pool is looking or how a map quality is. But I think that whole disconnect of bringing it to the public and like kind of whining about it is a really big problem that we should address, right? This isn't something that's, I guess, positive for the community. If you pretty much just say something completely negative, I think it's just something that we really need to focus on. This also leads more into map pool feedback channels where some people specifically have historically been very unprofessional with the way they give feedback, calling map pool is trash, calling map pools they should retire. Same with refing. People think that refs don't really have feelings and they kind of just pretty much just say like, I remember this tweet distinctly also got like 100 likes saying like, this referee is the worst referee of all time and we need to banish them no matter what. And it's just like, I feel like there's not that strong of an understanding between players how these roles actually are, right? If you're reffing 4 matches at once, chances are you're not going to be focusing on the individual quality of matches, and you're going to have to be strict with your timers because you're reffing so much at once. And if you're map pooling, you're not catering towards one specific player, right? You're catering towards the entire player base, and it becomes so difficult because different players want different things, and it becomes incredibly difficult to please everyone at the same time. And I think this is something that everyone should recognize because in order for us to have a stronger relationship, not only should players be more understanding of how staffing works and vice versa with staffing understanding what the players want, but the communication between players and I guess the open feedback online with platforms and the staffing transparency towards players is something that we all need to work on. And yeah, I think that if we were able to solve all these problems, this is an incredibly difficult situation to solve because there's just so much that's going on right now, and it's incredibly difficult to even solve one of these problems because I think it's just like there's so much going on right now, and there's so much development that more and more people that are getting into the tournament scene are bringing in their own ideas and bringing in their own concepts. And I don't expect any change to be happening anytime soon. But I think it's something that we should really strive towards in order to not only create a more professional environment for players, but also to create a more professional environment for, I guess, the entire OSU scene as a whole. And yeah, um, I hope you guys kind of understood what I was talking about. I know that kind of talked about a lot of content, and I don't know. Should I ask for like questions now? Oh, I don't know if Habib is here, but oh,
Hey,
hello.
yeah, I'm here. What's up?
I kind of talked about mostly what I wanted to talk about today. I don't know if I should go over anything more.
That sounds good. I think you reached a pretty solid point of stopping. You can say you're um your thank yous. Although you'll still be here, and we'll sort of have a post talk discussion as well.
Okay, sure. I mean, we could have that discussion right now, I guess, or
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
I'm okay if anything.
yeah. I think
Thank yous.
yeah. Well, no, thank you as in
Oh, thank you to
the
everyone for listening, I guess, for sure. Yeah. I really appreciate it. It's nice to have a small platform to talk about what my opinions on. I hope that people kind of understood, or kind of have a better understanding of how tournaments function, I guess.